Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for traveling with us this morning on our Shabbat journey. As we meet the Israelites on their journey, clearly they run into some very rough terrain on land and some rough going on the terrain of the heart. They're going to need things to do, things to keep them occupied, to direct their feet and their hands, and most especially their eyes and their hearts onto the right path. They fall off that path pretty spectacularly in this parsha, going in essence, whoring after their eyes and hearts, straying, committing a kind of adultery in their relationship with the Holy One. They give in to doubt, to a terrible sense of low self-esteem. They essentially give up and say, this is as far as we come. We can go no further. And though the consequence is great for them believing the report of the spies, or at least 10 of them who come in and say the land is beautiful and fertile and overwhelmingly abundant, but we can't conquer it. The people are giants. We look like grasshoppers in their eyes. That was bad enough, but they go on to say, and so we looked to ourselves. And so though they are consigned, that generation, to fall in the desert, their children are nonetheless given something to do to try to prevent them from falling into the same pit of despair or straying after their eyes and hearts to things that will lead them to nowhere but a place of loss. And so they are told at the end of this parsha to tie fringes to the ends of their garments, tzitzit, which to this day remain at the corners of our prayer shawls. When we make the blessing before putting on this garment, it actually doesn't mention talit. It's a blessing for wrapping ourselves in the tzitzit. Even though they're on the fringe, they are absolutely the most essential part of this garment. The talit, the prayer shawl, can be as simple as a piece of cloth, totally unadorned, although with the idea of chidur mitzvah, beautifying the mitzvah, many talitot, many prayer shawls are beautiful. Some take years to put together and are great labors of love. But in the end, it is the fringes, the tassels that are commanded in this week's parsha, and that are so essential to our prayer wardrobe, and in certain parts of the Jewish world, to everyday wardrobe. There are some ancient correlations with the fringes that I found very interesting, and I hope you'll bear with me for a moment, a little bit of sort of academia or a little bit of archaeology about this tradition. Dr. Fishbane in the Jewish Study Bible teaches that in antiquity, fringes were common in Canaanite and Mesopotamian dress. I didn't know that. Prophets from the Babylonian city of Mari legitimated their oracles for the king by sending a fringe from their garment, which was a symbolic way of sending part of themselves, like a signature. The imprinting that we see of fringes on clay tablets that were discovered from that era, kind of like the touching of the fringe of the prayer shawl to the Torah today, when one is called to the Torah, I'll come back to that in a second. That was a way of verifying or endorsing the written document, making an imprint of fringes on a written document. I love that. Like garments and hair, fringes were considered part of the individual's identity. And when people gave a fringe to the ruler, a person was pledging their loyalty. It was a very grand and widespread gesture to demonstrate fealty to the ruler. And it's actually no accident that the violet blue wool, the techelet, that was supposed to be attached to the fringes was identical to the cord that hung from the priest's headdress. That's back in Exodus chapter 28, verse 37, where they use the exact same language, the patil techelet, that we're used to language from our Shema section. That was supposed to affix part of the Kohen's headdress. So these tzitzit, which were worn by everybody, it should be noted, not just the priests, were to further identify the Jewish people as choosing, or having been chosen, to have a unique and special and sometimes very burdensome relationship with the divine presence, to carry this Torah. It's why I never mind the notion of having been chosen to have this Torah, because as far as I know, no other ancient people had exactly this Torah, and it has been an extraordinary burden that I carry gratefully, but does often weigh very heavily on the shoulders of the Jewish people. So myself, I don't have a problem with feeling set apart to have this very unique and special destiny. So these fringes, though they were common in ancient life as an expression of devotion to the ruler, it's not just enough to have them hanging there. I just want to think about that for a second. They can't just sit there. The rabbis of old decided we needed to do something with them. And if you look and pay attention to our services, our rabbis were so clever. Instead of them just dangling off the side of our prayer garments, they said, let's gather them up. Let's hold them close to ourselves. You see that in the early part of our service, everyone who's on early. There's a point in the early part of the service where Cantor Rudy says, we gather our tzitzit and draw them close to us. They're supposed to symbolize at that moment the ingathering of the exiles, whether it's physical or spiritual, but a sense of the Jewish people physically drawing themselves in and inviting all of us to come together. Unity is such a scarce commodity these days. We are so incredibly fragmented, and the Jewish people have never been a monolith. That would be very boring. But at least we're supposed to be united in our goal to make Judaism special, to feel special as Jews, and to plumb this tradition for its incredible variety. And look at the interpretations across the centuries. They're inexhaustible. We have never been united in mind, but we're supposed to be united in heart with love for this tradition. So gathering the tzitzit is a way to do that, at least to manifest that symbolically for a few moments. Another way, of course, we use the tzitzit is to come and sort of imprint them, if you will, on the Torah scroll when people are called to the Torah. And I know not everyone in our community wants to do that or feels comfortable to do that, but I invite you to do that, to put on a prayer shawl, to wrap the tzitzit around our fingers, literally bind this tradition to our hands for a moment, and touch the Torah scroll, and then bring the words, as it were, to our lips. There are so many ways to use these talits, these tzitzit. We raise them when the Torah is lifted to reenact the scene thousands of years ago when Ezra had the scroll, probably of Deuteronomy, read to the people, and they raised their hands. We not only raise our hands, we raise our tzitzit. When the Torah comes around, very often people will reach out their tzitzit and then kiss the fringes to say, I love these words. I don't understand them all, but I want to have a relationship with them. And I love them for the way they have sustained this tiny little fringe people, if you will, for thousands of years. And of course, in the paragraph that is the end of our Torah portion, the rabbis built in 3 places where we say the word tzitzit and we kiss the fringes each time. It's a way not just to have these fringes fulfilling the mitzvah that's laid out in the Torah, but to take it a step or many steps further by saying we actually not just affix them to our garments, but we actually do something with them. We take them and make them a physical manifestation of our relationship with this people, with this scripture, and with our God. I always say to people getting their talit for the first time, it's usually bar mitzvah youngins or olders, but it can be people of any age. When you take that talit and you wrap yourself in it and give each side of the atara, as the custom developed, the collar, a kiss, and then later when you give a little kiss to the tzitzit, it's as though all of the generations that have come before you are giving you a hug, sending you a kiss, and saying, let's love this tradition together. I read something this week about the tzitzit that I really loved. I'd not thought about it before, that the placement of the tzitzit on the edge of our garments, I realize it's obviously not on pants where we would most likely have a hem, but obviously we weren't going to put something very precious and ritually important on the ground. But the fact that the fringes were connected or are connected to the edge of the garments, where, as this lovely teacher Nina Woke pointed out, is the part of the garment most likely to fray or start to unravel, is exactly the place that the fringes should be. It is exactly where we should put the tzitzit, because when things start to fall apart, we need to look to our tradition to keep us whole, to keep us steady, to help us to stay the course that was set for our ancestors so long ago. So where else would they be but on the part of the clothing most likely to come apart? It feels like every week something else just unravels. Here in Los Angeles, we had a terrible altercation outside of a synagogue last Sunday. It was just devastating to see. It's a miracle more people weren't hurt, but just to watch clashes between Jewish people and people who would hurt Jewish people is just shredding to the soul. You feel like things are coming apart, and that's just one example. So many places around the world and in our beloved state of Israel and all around where our nerves and our souls and our societies just fraying. And yet this was put in place a long time ago at another time when things were falling apart. And no, it's not going to fix everything, but it's an invitation to hold on, to wear our Judaism, which a lot of people are very hesitant about doing these last many months and even years. A kippah, a Star of David, even a mezuzah, those aren't really mandated in the Torah. The mezuzah is a real interpretation of put these words on your doorposts and on your gates. But the tzitzit are mandated pretty well straight out, not exactly how to tie them and what they really should look like. And we don't have the blue thread, so we're already our rabbis a long time ago decided that wasn't something they could actually keep, so they took it out. Very brave. But the fringes themselves are commanded. We need not be afraid to have these fringes on our prayer shawls, or even to wear them in what they call a talit katan, underneath clothing, for those who might choose to do. I've known very few women who do that, but there are a few. And of course, I grew up in a school where the boys had to wear their tzitzit under their clothing. But they had to be visible. They couldn't be hidden. And I think ultimately what this commandment, though it may be an adaptation of ancient Canaanite and Mesopotamian practices, what this is ultimately saying is, wear your Judaism with pride. Wear a kippah. Wear a Star of David. Put your mezuzah up if you haven't already, and don't take it down if you have. Kendra, Andy, and I had so much delight finding that there are new people in the neighborhood who've just moved in and have put up a big mezuzah on their doors. We had such a wash of comfort because there are very, very few Jews, or noticeably anyway, in our neighborhood. It made us feel so good, and we said we need to go over and meet them and invite them to our sukkah in a few months at least, if not before then. Wear your Judaism with pride. The Israelites had their sense of themselves as Jews and what their destiny was utterly fray and fall apart in this week's Parsha. But they were given the commandment of Tzitzit to say, get back up again. You are knocked down, get back up. Those of you who can, tie yourself to this tradition. Hold on to your neighbors and your friends, and let's keep going together. Shabbat Shalom.